everybody, welcome to our section 4.7 lecture video on problem solving equations containing fractions. So I think the title says exactly what we're doing. We're going to solve some equations that happen to have fractions in them. So really with these there's two options and it is completely up to you which one you use. To be honest, I use one option sometimes and the other option other times. So it depends on the equation that I'm solving how I'm going to do it. But I'm going to show you both options and you can choose what you use on your homework today, okay? So the first option is if you're good at operations with fractions, you just solve it normally. So what I mean by that would be like in example A, where we have x plus 4/15. Well, if you're adding something, the opposite of adding would be subtracting, right? So you just subtract 4/15 from both sides and have a great day. And that's what I mean with option 1, is you're just adding normally or subtracting something. It's just that you're adding or subtracting or multiplying or dividing by a fraction. And sometimes I think that's the easiest thing to do, especially when you only have one or two things going on. I think that's a really great thing to do. For option 2, if you don't enjoy operations with fractions, or if there's just a lot of them and it's a pretty messy looking problem, you can clear out your fractions by multiplying both sides by the least common denominator. So you can multiply both sides of your equation, because we're still dealing with equations where you need to keep them in balance. So we've got to multiply both sides by the same thing, but we're specifically going to multiply both sides by that least common denominator, because that'll actually clear out your fractions, which is a pretty happy day. So let me show you both of those, and then once you're doing your homework, you can decide which one is the better way to go with the problem that you have. Okay? So part A, I think I mentioned this. If it was me, I'd just solve it normally. We have x plus 4/15. Well, I want to get rid of that plus 4/15, so the opposite of adding would be subtracting. I'll subtract 4/15 from both sides. So let's see, 4/15 minus 4/15 is 0. I'm just left with an x on the left side. Negative 3/15 minus 4/15 would be negative 7/15 on the right side. And I'm done. I have x equals negative 7/15. If you'd like to check your work, you're welcome to do so. Negative 7/15 plus 4/15 does equal negative 3/15. We did great. Okay, let's try another one. In part B, I have negative 3/8 equals x minus 5/6. So I just see that I would need to get rid of that minus 5/6. The opposite of subtracting would be adding. So I'm going to add 5/6 to both sides of my equation. That minus 5/6 then plus 5/6 would be 0. So I'm just left with an x on that side. On the left side, they do not have the same denominator yet, so I'm going to have to do that first. With 8 and 6, my least common denominator would be 24. So let's go ahead and get it to have the same denominator so we can actually add them. To go from 8 to 24, I'm going to need to multiply by 3. So I'll multiply my denominator and my numerator by 3. And that would give me negative 9/24. To go from 6 to 24, I would multiply by 4. So I'll multiply my denominator and my numerator to get 20/24. And now I can actually add them. One of them is negative and one's positive, so I'm actually going to be subtracting. I'll do 20 minus 9, which would be 11. It will be positive because the bigger one's positive. And the denominator stays the same. I will get 11/24 equals x. Okay, let's do another one. In part C, I've got x minus 5/3 equals negative 2. Would you guys like to try this one? Good. I'll give you a minute. Go ahead and pause your video, work that one out, and I will give you the answer in 3, 2, 1. You should get x equals negative 1/3 on that one. So you'll add 5/3 to both sides. Just a reminder that negative 2 is the same thing as negative 6/3, because it's negative 2/1 as a fraction, okay? So then you'll have negative 6/3 plus 5/3, which would be negative 1/3 as an answer. Cool. Let's do another one. In part D, I've got 3/5 y equals negative 6/11. So I have negative 3/5 times y, so the opposite of multiplication would be division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3/5. Okay? 3/5 divided by 3/5 is 1. 1y equals. To do my division on the right side, I'll change it to multiplication. So that'll be negative 6/11 multiplied by the reciprocal, which is 5/3. And then I look to see if I can simplify something, and I can. 6 and 3 are both divisible by 3. 6 divided by 3 would be 2. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And I can multiply straight across. 2 times 5 is 10. 11 times 1 is 11. And a negative number times a positive number is a negative. So our answer is negative 10/11. E is very similar. So I'm going to let you guys try E for a second. So go ahead and pause your videos again. Go ahead and try part E. And I will give you the answer for E in 3, 2, 1. You should get W equals 15/8. So what you're going to do in part E is divide both sides by negative 4/9. Okay? So then you would do negative 5/6 times the reciprocal, which would be negative 9/4. The 9 and 6 simplify a little bit to 3 and 2. And then you'll multiply straight across. 5 times 3 is 15. 2 times 4 is 8. And a negative times a negative would give you a positive 15/8. Alright, let's look at part F. So part F, I've got 8x minus 3/5 equals 6x plus 11/15. So for this one, it's really, I could go either way, but I'll show you how to do it kind of the normal way, and we'll do the multiplying by the least common denominator on the last two, okay? So if I'm going to solve this one normally, first thing I like to do is just get my x's together. So I'll subtract 6x from both sides so that I don't have any x's on the right side, and they're all on the left side. So it's 8x minus 6x would be 2x. So I have 2x minus 3/5 equals 11/15. Then I want to get my x by itself. So if I want to get rid of the minus 3/5, the opposite of subtracting is adding. So I'll add 3/5 to both sides. That minus 3/5 and plus 3/5 will cancel out. That'll be 0. I'll just have 2x on the left side. On the right side, I need to get a common denominator because they're not the same right now. My least common denominator will be 15. The 11/15 already has the right denominator, so it stays the same. For the second fraction over here, to go from 5 to 15, I would multiply by 3 and multiply by 3. So that would be equivalent to 9/15. Then I can go ahead and add those together. 11 plus 9 would be 20, so now I've got 20/15. And I can simplify that. They're both divisible by 5. So I can simplify that a bit. So now I've got 2x equals 4/3, 4/3. And then last but not least, I need to get rid of that 2, right? And that's multiplied by 2, so I'll divide by 2 on both sides. Dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. Same as multiplying by a half. So that's going to be easier with my fractions. 2 divided by 2 would be 1, so now I've got 1x. With the 4/3 divided by 2, which is the same thing as 4/3 times a half, I can simplify the 4 and the 2 because they're both divisible by 2. And one is in a numerator, one is in a denominator. So I can divide by 2 in the denominator and divide by 2 in the numerator. And what I'll get as an answer here would be 2/3. Because 2 times 1 is 2, 3 times 1 is 3. So my answer is x equals 2/3. That one took a little more work. which is fine. Some of these do. Alright, for G and H, I'm going to show you guys the multiplying by the least common denominator method so that you are familiar with it and you feel like you could maybe use it, because it makes life a lot easier. The first step's the hard one though, and after that it gets really easy, which is wonderful. In part G, my denominators are 6 and 3, so that means my least common denominator would be 6. So what I'm going to show you is what happens if you multiply both sides by that least common denominator. So if you multiply everything by 6, and that includes the 4b, because we can't just pick and choose what we multiply by, everybody gets it, okay? It's all or nothing. And what I would do is just take it one term at a time. For 6 times 5, 6, you can make that into a 6 over 1. What's going to happen is that the 6's are going to divide out. Divide by 6 and divide by 6. And you're going to have 1 times 5, which is 5, over 1 times 1, which is 1. 5 divided by 1 would be 5. My next term is a negative 4b, and I'm multiplying everything by 6, so that includes this too. 6 times negative 4b would be negative 24b. My last one is 1/3 times 6, and again, I can make that 6 look like a fraction to make it a little easier. The 3 and the 6 are both divisible by 3, so I'm going to divide by 3 and divide by 3. Then I'm going to have 1 times 2, which would be 2. 1 times 1, which is 1. 2 divided by 1 would be 2. And you can see after that first step, I know that first step took a little while and looks a little messy, but afterwards I don't have any fractions anymore, which is really nice. Okay? And then you can just solve it pretty normally like what we've been doing. So if I want to get b by itself, I'll subtract 2 from both sides, and I'll get 3 equals negative 24b. And then to get b all the way by itself, I'll divide by negative 24 on both sides. So I'll have b equals of 3 over negative 24. So 3 and 24 are both divisible by 3. So I can divide by 3 and divide by 3 to simplify. A positive divided by a negative would be a negative number. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 24 divided by 3 is 8. So b would equal negative 1/8. Okay, let's do one more like that with that least common denominator. Okay, so in part H, I've got 8, 12, and 4. Can you guys guess what the least common denominator is going to be for 8, 12, and 4? You could either do the factor tree method like we've been doing, or you can look at the least common multiple of 8, 12, and 4 to find it. You should be getting 24. So I'm going to multiply every single term by 24. And I kind of run out of space. It gets a little crowded, but it's worth it, okay? With that first one, if I do 24 times 7/8, that's 24 over 1 times 7/8. 8 and 24 are both divisible by 8, so I'll divide by 8 and divide by 8. And then I'm just left with 3 times 7, which would be 21. Then I'll have a plus sign because that'll go away. My next term is a 4k. 4k times 24 would be 96k. We have a minus sign, so we still do. I have 11 over 12 times 24. And if you want to put that 24 over 1, you're welcome to. I can divide by 12 and divide by 12 to simplify. Oops. 12 divided by 12 is not 12. 12 divided by 12 is 1. And I'm just left with 11 times 2, which would be 22. There's an equal sign before, and it stays there. Next term is 8k times 24, which would be 192k. In my last term, I have a plus sign. I have 3/4 times 24. And if it helps to put that 24 over 1, feel free to do so. I can divide by 4 and divide by 4 to simplify. And I'm left with 3 times 6, which is 18. And see, doesn't that look nice? I think so. Alright. So let's see. From here, I would probably combine like terms on that left side to simplify it. 21 minus 22 would be negative 1. So I'll have 96k minus 1 equals 192k plus 18. Then I would probably get the k's together next. And you can do it either way, but I'll just subtract 96k from both sides to get all the k's together. 96k minus 96k is 0, and 0 minus 1 is negative 1. On the right side, 192k minus 96k is 96k. And we still have that plus 18 over here. Then I'm trying to get k by itself, so I'll subtract 18 from both sides to get negative 19 equals 96k. And divide by 96 on both sides, which will give me negative 19 over 96 equals k. And that doesn't simplify at all. 19 is nice and prime, and 96 is not divisible by 19. So we're done on that one. Okay. So hopefully this gives you guys some good examples to start out with this week. If you have any questions at all along the way, please feel free to reach out to me. Have a great week, guys.